Hello, this is Kevin Polk with a voiceover recording of using the psychological flexibility model, also known as the workability model matrix with prosocial. And we'll get started here. There is the basic matrix diagram. You can either just start with the 4 questions, or you can start doing the 2 discrimination tasks, which are 1 discrimination task 2 first. And whichever way you say something like, hi, I'm, Kevin Polk, or whatever your name is. I work from the psychological flexibility point of view. Is it okay if I show you that point of view? Get at least a few people to say, yeah, it's okay. And then you could then launch into have them notice a pen or something with their 5 senses, some other object, leaving off taste because that's not sanitary. Then you go down, have them put the object away, close their eyes maybe, and do mental experiencing of the object. And this time, of course, they can taste it all they want because it's inside their mind. And then just briefly have them notice the difference between their 5 senses experiencing and mental experiencing. Then you have folks recall how it feels to notice how it feels to recall moving toward who's important to you over there. Then you say, okay, you got that, great. Now come over here and notice how it feels to recall moving away from some unwanted mental experience like fear. I have fear down there. And just once somebody nods their head and says, yes, they've noticed that, then have them notice the difference, and you go on. And if I've shown that, I would then say, okay, that's the beginnings of the psychological flexibility point of view. Is it okay if I go ahead and show you or ask you 4 questions to round out the psychological flexibility point of view? I get 1 or 2 people or everybody to say, yeah, sure, you can ask me those questions, and we go on. If I was leaving off that little preamble there, I would say, hi, I'm Kevin Polk. I work from the psychological flexibility point of view. Is it okay if I ask you 4 questions so I can start showing you that point of view? Notice in that I'm always asking permission. I always start by asking permission. Is it okay if I show you this point of view? I'm not going to get into why that's important, but it is. And so at that point, everybody said yes on this presentation. They've said it twice. So now I ask who, I leave out the what for right now, who is important to you? And I have people say it. And usually I'm working on a whiteboard or a flip chart. So I write down what they say. So mom, dad, siblings, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, da-da-da-da-da. Have a good time writing that up in that area. I say, great, after we're done with that. Do it as long as you want, depending on how much time you got to work with. Then I go over here and say, well, what kind of stuff can show up inside of you and get in the way of moving toward who's important to you? For example, you may have thought about asking somebody out on a date, and what showed up inside of you just after you thought about doing that? Well, maybe fear, because you were afraid they might say no, that kind of thing. But then other stuff can show up too, and so then we get anger, frustration, hate, all kinds of stuff shows up over here. Great, now we got that out. Now, what kind of behaviors do you do to move away from this stuff like fear? Let's say, for example, if fear showed up inside of you, what might you do? Well, you'd run away, avoid, hide, whatever. Great. Anger, well, people yell and they slam their fist. Maybe they fight. Frustration, well, then they do slam their fist down. Drink, sleep. If they're tired, they may sleep. All kinds of stuff. So you've got a nice list up here. And I notice I'm drawing these half semicircles like that with my cursor. That's so later on I can go ahead and do loops back down if I'm sort of getting at what's known as a unworkable change agenda over there. But that's not for now. After I do that a little bit, I come over and say, what could you do to move toward who's important to you? And then we do walk, talk, go out on a date, kiss them, hug them, all that good stuff. Great. That was the individual loop. Loop 1 for prosocial. We then go to the second loop. And The second loop has to do with the group, the work group, the people, the classroom, whoever that you're working with. And the first question you ask is, well, then you ask permission again. So that was, we started off the psychological flexibility point of view for the individuals. Now I'd like to ask you 4 questions about working inside this work group. So is it okay if I ask you 4 more questions so we can start looking at this work group, this classroom, this whatever from this point of view? They go, oh yeah, fine. Okay. What is the shared purpose? And so we don't have to belabor this right now because that's going to be an ongoing topic, but you have them write it down, and start at least giving some broad brush stuff of what the shared purpose of the group is. What kind of unwanted stuff shows up inside of group members and gets in the way of moving towards a shared purpose? So anger, ego, frustrations, all kinds of stuff can show up that can get in the way. And this is light. Keep it light, nice and light and breezy. What kind of stuff do people do to move away from this unwanted stuff that shows up? Well, they show up late. They don't show up. They yell. They steal other people's ideas. They all kinds of stuff. Now, at this time, people can start dissing on away moves. Remember that if a bus shows up, fear will show up inside of you and you'll do an away move. So not all away moves are bad. So I do at some time start talking to them about there are workable away moves. And in all, this is not only the psychological flexibility model, it's also the workability model. So we're looking at behaviors, whether they be toward or away behaviors that work to move us toward our purpose on an individual. It's for the individual's purpose in life. So that's that. But we have some good times talking about that stuff. Then we go over here and begin the discussion about, well, what could the group do to move toward a shared purpose? So they can talk and share and be nice to each other and all kinds of good stuff over there. And of course, that's an ongoing project because with any group, they're needing to come up with new ideas that would hopefully move them toward the shared purpose. I explained to them at this point that it's important for them to look at the group from this point of view in an ongoing way, so they keep doing something called monitoring the group. That is monitoring to make sure they're on track to the shared purpose, that they're monitoring the behaviors both toward and away that they're doing to make sure they're working, because you want to trim off the behaviors that aren't working and you want to keep the ones that are working. And now we're getting into something called Ostrom's 8. And I do tell them that Ostrom's 8 is where 8 principles or features of successful groups that a Nobel Prize winner named Eleanor Ostrom, she came up with them. They're not theoretical. They watch successful groups, and after years of watching them, her and her graduate students, research associates, came up with 8 design features that successful groups do. And so I don't want to show you all 8 at once, and I tell them that's too much. We're just going to start with a couple. So let's start with group identity and share in purpose. And remember, we already had that back here. So we've already got one of them. And I've already talked about monitoring, because it's really important for us to monitor. The 0 in the middle here would mean that we're doing a really lousy job at knowing our group identity and purpose, and we're doing a really lousy job at monitoring. Well, we're just getting started here, so we don't know. But let's have a discussion. And this little arrow here stands for a matrix. That's a little matrix. So let's do one. Remember down here in the lower right-hand part? Well, group identity and purpose would go down there. The kind of stuff that shows up inside of group members and gets in the way of that goes down here. The away behaviors go up here. The toward behaviors go up there, just like before. So you've formed a matrix. I don't really have a matrix. Looks sort of like this, and you put shared purpose down there and do a matrix for that. Same with monitoring. That stands for a matrix. So you get yourself a new piece of paper out and put monitoring down here in the lower right. and then talk about the stuff that can show up and get in the way of monitoring and the away behaviors toward behaviors. And remember, monitoring is a biggie there, because we want the group right here in the middle here, noticing, monitoring right here in the middle, to keep group behaviors that work for the shared purpose, and get rid of group behaviors that don't work for the shared purpose. So great. So now we've got 2. That was easy, just starting with 2 of Ostrom's 8. And then we'll add on another one, collaborative decision making. Eleanor and her colleagues discovered that that's very important. And notice I got a little matrix there. So then in the lower right part is collaborative decision making. What's showing up in the way of collaborative decision making? What are away moves to lessen that step that could be working or not working for collaborative decision making? And what are we planning to do? What could we do for collaborative decision? Each one getting its own matrix. Boom, conflict resolution. Groups need good conflict resolution procedures, so let's do that. Once again, a matrix on that. And then boom, proportional cost of benefits. That is, you're getting fairly compensated for the work that you're putting in. So somebody who's doing 200% needs to be getting really recognized, and 50% not so recognized. So let's make sure that's fair. And now I'm just going to show you the whole thing. Boom. These are polycentric governance. That means that your group is nested underneath other groups that are doing Ostrom's 8. Minimum rights to organize is very important. That means the group above you, let's say you're a city and there's a state above you or a county above you, they've given you the rights to organize. If they haven't, then you're a rebel group, and that's a different story. Graduated sanctions, that's the punishment fits the crime. We got the other ones. You can Google any one of these and look these up. But we're finally, and we're doing a matrix on each one of these. Each one of those sounds like a matrix, or looks like a matrix, or is a matrix. And finally, there you go. And there's the wheel, the spoke diagram it's known as. And what that means, that's we've got the 0 to 10. So if a group is doing 10 on each one of these, each of Ostrom's 8, then it's just rolling along, just swimmingly, and it just needs to coming back and keep monitoring and make sure it keeps everything all nice and aired up, to use that analogy. But many groups have some little flat spots in there where they're not at a full 10, so they may be at 10 on some and not 10 on others, and so they're having a bumpy ride. Then, of course, you could get all the way down. Now, then you get into efficiency. Let's say a group was all 5s. Well, it's sort of rolling right along, but it's not rolling along as well as it could. It could get inflated up and be a much more efficient ride, because a small tire, doesn't go as far in one revolution as a fully aired up tire. It's sort of like that kind of idea. And then here's 0. There are groups that are just 0 on everything, and they're just spinning on their axle, and a little like a like someone spinning on their axle. I guess it's a simile. So there you go. That's how you do 2 loops around the matrix. That gets people started toward or into Ostrom's 8. You gradually pick up Ostrom's 8, doing a matrix for each one of them. And, of course, you pace that. Don't do Ostrom's 8 all at once. I've already discovered that's too much. Start 1, 2, 3. It's going to take you... Counts on the group. I don't know how long, but a few sessions, 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know, to get all of these mapped out. And then they need to form some system where they can continue to monitor themselves. And of course, that's easy, because this is monitoring. You just keep whooping out the Ostrom's 8 spoke diagram and having them score themselves. And anytime you can have people take a secret poll, a secret thing to see where they think each other, and then a group one and compare the two. Maybe individually they say one thing, and out of the group they say another thing, and that happens, and you could reveal that. You could say, wow, when we have the group conversation, we're all 10s, but when you guys turn in your individual responses, we're not all 10s. So we need to work on that kind of thing. But just keeping things nice and open and breezy and talking. So there you go. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.